Got sounds going on outside, we've got cars driving by, I got a window open. We don't care, we haven't recorded in a while, so here's we gonna go. That was right English, right? That was correct English? Who knows anymore. Hi, I'm Anya. I haven't recorded in a while because I've been soups busy with schoolwork. And I'm finally able to take a tiny maybe little short break just to do some recording. That's what I've been wanting to do. So what did I want to talk about today? A few weeks ago, I made a video on the history of the Druids, and I know that's kind of a dense video. It was a lot of stuff, a lot of information, but you know, that's what it is when you start doing research, man. You just there's so much and you want to make sure it's correct and right. But today I wanted to do a video about what Druidry means to me. What I actually wanted to do was just organize my thoughts better so I could talk both a little bit about modern Druidry and what I've gleaned from different readings on spirituality and different spiritual practices based on Druidry, and then how that translates into meaning for me. So let me I gotta get back into the groove of talking about Druidry and Druid stuff and all this stuff, okay? So let me start off with a disclaimer here. I'm gonna start doing more on these videos because you know what? It is sometimes impossible to talk about anything on videos on YouTube because you know you're going to be putting yourself out there, and even if you are having a laugh about it or being honest with yourself or being honest with at least your own knowledge thus far, there's always a bit of vulnerability of putting yourself out there. But there's a vulnerability not just of putting yourself out there, there's a vulnerability of what's gonna come back at you. What if you don't have all the knowledge and someone has something else and you feel bad because maybe you don't feel like you're doing something justice? We can really only act in what we know now, in the here and now. I am talking from a point of my own knowledge now, and at some point in the future my own knowledge might grow and expand. I might read something else and incorporate that into myself. That is part of the evolution of self, isn't it? That's what we all should be doing. That's what we all should be feeling like when we're making our own growth and self-improvement. So this is based on my own readings and understandings about Druidry up to this point. This is what Druidry has come to mean to me, and this is what I understand about modern Druidry. Now, unlike the video on the history of the Druids, this is going to be more based on Druid spirituality. Let me also state I am a solitary Druid. I'm not part of any sort of like grove or anything like that. So this is essentially what it comes to mean to me. So I've read a few different books on the subject of Druidry as a spirituality. I think the first book I started reading was Paganism by the Higginbothams. And you know, a lot of times when you're reading about paganism as a spirituality, as a faith, as an earth-based practice, you see a lot about witches, witchcraft, Wicca. Those are the ones that I think really come into people's minds first and foremost. And Druidry is sometimes there, but it might be more in the background. Druid and Druidry was a word that I picked up on almost immediately. As a kid, I remember just liking the word Druid. So when I saw Druid coming up again, as I started doing studies and explorations on paganism and spirituality, I decided that once I got through some of this overview about earth-based faiths and things like that, I would go into Druidry. I started with, I think, The Path of Druidry by Penny Billington. There's been a few books that I've read on this subject. This sort of dive into Druidry as a faith is what helped build my own ideas about Druidry and its spirituality and how I ultimately integrated into my life. So let me talk about what I perceive modern day Druidry to be. Now, we talked about in the history of the Druids video, the hints of the ideas of different classes, the bards, the ovates, and the druids. This is still present in modern day Druidry, and each of these levels are all factor into the overall path of Druidry. But each one of them is in some ways like a different level of Druid, but all of it interconnects to Druidry. I believe it is Penny Billington's book that talks about the main tenets or the main beliefs of Druidry as a practice. In the same way Christianity, the main tenets of the faith are faith, hope, and love. Druids and Druidry, the main tenets of it become creativity, wisdom, and love. In doing different readings about these different sects, I sort of started to tie those tenets of Druidry to each of these different levels of Bard, Ovate, and Druid, because I feel you can kind of see them intermingling in different ways in each of these levels. So let's start with the Bard. Bard is probably a word you've heard before if you're familiar with different sort of fantasy settings. Bard is a common minstrel or musician who's often telling stories through their work and their music creation. It's also a class in Dungeons and Dragons, so it's definitely a word that we still use and that resonates with us today. To me, the Bard is all about creativity. It's all about the idea of making things. So yes, music and writing lyrics and, singing that and having such a way with words that can ultimately change minds and perceptions. That was sort of a magic of the Bard that people back in, ancient times might have feared about the Druids. To hear that a Bard could sway kings and peasants alike with their words and what they had to say about heroes. They could change minds just with their words. And that was thought to be the magic behind the bards. And we can still see that in some ways with at least the creativity of the bards today. Maybe not so much in the sway, because I think today people are a lot more critical of things. I would like to think that we are more able to hear things and understand things, integrate knowledge, but then also consider other ideas and perspectives, right? But there is still a magic in the bardic path that asks you to express your creativity. Human beings are one of the few animals, the few creatures on this planet that are actually able to create things, to use our minds, not just for logic and ideas and rationality, but also for creativity and building things that we can imagine. And the idea behind that creativity, and the idea behind creativity being one of the tenets of Druidry, is then your creativity has to become a responsibility to the world, to the planet. How are you using your creativity and your gifts and your craft to make the world better? And that can be in any sort of way. It doesn't have to be the musical way of the bards of olden days. It can be in terms of writing. It can be in terms of video creation. It can be in terms of painting and art. It can be the work you do on a daily basis at your daily job. Are you using it to find ways to better the world, to better yourself? Does that become inspiration to put a new art into the world, So that is where creativity becomes such a major tenet of Druidry and the practice of it. So that's where I see the creative aspect of the Druid path coming into play. The way I see the next one come into play is with the Ovates. In the history of the Druids, I know I talked a little bit about the Ovates, and they became feared in ancient times because of the ideas of human sacrifice. And again, I am not going to deny that yes, ancient peoples probably did commit human and animal sacrifices, but we see that in a lot of beliefs in ancient times. We can see hints of that in, modern faiths back when they were first born, where people were still okay and comfortable with the idea of sacrificing things for a god, not because it's a good idea, but because at the time their faith is how they made sense of life, because their own lives were probably the most valuable things that they had. So the idea of sacrificing their own life to the divine would have been such a high honor for people who were very spiritual or religious, or the idea of giving other lives to their divine spirits equally they felt had a benefit in their life. Again, not saying it's good, not justifying it, but I am saying that people were different back then, and that's one of the benefits of being able to grow and evolve and look back on history and go, let's never be that again. Let's not go back to doing that's not a good idea, which I agree with. It's not a good idea. Please, let's get that out of our minds regarding pagans. That's my disclaimer about sacrifice and life sacrifices specifically. We ain't into that. I don't know why I feel like I need to stress this so much, but no. Life sacrifices, no. But the Ovates, their power in a more modern sense comes from the connection to nature. The Ovates were people who studied nature and the sky and created a good connection to animal life, to plant life, to flora and fauna, but also to the sky and watching above and, mapping out of the stars. So the ovates became connected to themselves and ultimately the world around them. That sort of connection to the earth and to the sky and to all of the different realms on this plane, becoming more connected to earth and the planet and to the sky and to the stars above, the entire universe, becoming more connected to that, not only connects you as an individual to it, but it helps you as an individual connect to all of the life on it. And that does create a sense of unity and love and knowing that you are not separate from it all. You are very much connected. You and your actions have an effect on the entire earth, on the entire planet that you live on. Even if it's just your little space, your little pocket of where you live, you are having an effect. And that is part of the power of the ovates, this connection to the earth and to the sky and to water, to all of these different realms, and reminding you that that connection means that you are connected to all and all are connected to you. In my opinion, that's how you tie some of the love aspect into it. But there's also the fact that the ovates, in their connection to the earth, would also work a lot with intuition and connection in that sort of sense as well. So there was a lot to the ovates, more than just this idea of sacrifice. And in a modern sense, that is sort of where the ovates connect into this whole path of Druidry. But then you have the overall Druid. And remember, it took at least 20 years of studying to become part of the Druid order. So this was not something that was taken lightly. The people who became Druids did a lot of studying and a lot of work and a lot of connecting, and none of this was written down because the Druids had an oral tradition. So of course, a lot of what we know today is stuff that we glean from the very tiny bit of readings that we have about the Druids. But the Druid is where I connect this aspect of wisdom, because the Druids were seen as these wise judges and teachers, and essentially, I know I use the word wise, but they were the wisdom seekers. They were the individuals who were constantly studying and, in connection with the ovates and the bards. They had this whole system of interconnectedness, and the Druid was this realm of wisdom keepers and the judges of justice in the systems, and they would look at issues not from one perspective, but from many perspectives. At least that is how I have perceived it based on readings. So they needed to be wise and understanding of issues in a variety of different ways. So I try to incorporate little bits of these things regularly in my life. So like I was saying, the path of the bard these days, it's not necessarily that you're creating music and lyrics and trying to pwn people or, build up people. That is one interpretation of what the bard is. But as I was saying, the bard is equally just about creation and creativity and putting that into the world. In my spare time, I do a lot of writing, and I also occasionally make videos for YouTube. That's an art as well. I cook and I bake and I share those things with others, and there is a creative aspect and a creative element to this. It is utilizing your mind to visualize something, to see something, and then taking the time and the effort and the energy to do what you can to put it into the world, whether it's writing poetry and sharing it online, or working on a novel in your private time, or testing out new recipes and sharing them with friends and loved ones. Like, those are all little things that you can do to put that creative aspect of your mind to work and have a value and a benefit outside of yourself. And you can think it's so simple and easy, like, baking cookies and giving it to friends. Yeah, believe it or not, because you're bringing some sort of joy and cheer into the world. It's not necessarily that you have to do it on this big, massive scale. It can even be just small and intimate with yourself and with your friends and loved ones. Like, that is part of it as well. And I think most people who work in this way, whether you're a druid or not, you recognize that there is a benefit of creating something, whatever it is, and whether or not you share it with the world, whether or not you share it with anyone, you feel good when you make things. I think, I'm not the best artist, but occasionally I'll sit down and I'll paint something with water paints, or I'll draw something out, and whether or not it's good, there's something cathartic about having that release. Something as little as that can make you feel good too. And it's about the fact that you shared something with someone else, it made them feel good, and it feeds into you as well. There are so many benefits to this, and it increases not just your own sense of worth and, doing good for the world, but it also helps you stay connected to others, and that's important in this world as well. And I think all of that is tied to the bard, but you can see how that idea of connection then also ties into the ovate. If you're using your creative aspect of the bard, you can use that creativity to connect with others on the planet. If you are into the idea of giving food as a sacrifice to a divine, maybe you take time to bake bread and you cut off a few slices, you slather it with butter or something like that, and you put that outside for your divine, for your deities. If you work in that sense, it helps you feel connected to something greater, but you're also using your creativity, your time, and your energy to make something. And there's art in that, but there's also connection in that, because what you are sharing with the divine is your own work, but then you go and share it with others as well, and you feel connected on many different levels. And connection is so important. It's so important all of the time, but it's especially important right now when we are mostly still in a world of lockdowns and disconnection. So finding little ways to connect helps, but there's also the benefit and the ideas of going into nature, spending time outside, building connection with the trees and the plant life around you. There's a beauty in there, but there's also a peace in that. So connection can not just make us feel like we're not as alone and we're not isolated, but it can also just make us feel at peace. And that is also important as well. So that is how, the ovate can connect with me. And then you have the path of the druid. The druid can be a sort of difficult one in a world where there just feels like there's so much animosity and struggle in the world right now. And on the one hand, it's good because we're calling it out, we're recognizing it, we're seeing it, and we're trying to fix it. But there has also been an increase, at least that I've been seeing, especially on places like social media, where people just don't seem like they're here to understand other perspectives. They just want to yell, they just want to condescend, they just want to be rude and get their point across. And how do they do that? They yell and scream and they condescend because they're angry. And I get it. That's what happens when you get angry. You just can't take it anymore and you stop trying to be the nice guy. I totally get it. But unfortunately, I don't think that helps actually create a better world. So in the druid path, the idea of being a judge and a teacher, what I try to do in my personal life to connect to this idea of wisdom with the druid is to be better about seeing both sides, even the sides I completely disagree with. I do my damnedest to hear the arguments behind what people are saying. Again, even if it's something I vehemently disagree with, I at least try to hear it out, because I understand that hearing something is not the same as agreeing with it. Hearing out what people have to say, from there I can take what they're saying and start analyzing it down and reading into what is actually the concern here. Is there actually a problem here, or is it just, a lack of awareness and understanding? Is there a legitimate fear that someone has? And if we don't take the time to listen to and understand these things, then we're all just going to be in this constant circle of arguing and yelling and condescending, and no one's going to grow and get any better. And let's be honest, the world wants us all to be angry and yelling at one another, because then we don't have the time to fix anything, right? So to me, it becomes important to hear all sides of an argument. And at the end of it, a lot of times it means I am still on the same side that I started out in, because I have this sense of what I believe to be right and wrong. But it also maybe means that we can work to figure out other ways to integrate the concerns that all people have, because we are not solving anything by condescending and yelling. I use the space of the druid to encourage conversation and understanding on some levels, and integrating the things that I learn and pick up from other people's perspectives to try to find better ways and integrate all of that into better solutions. And I gotta admit, some days that's not easy. Sometimes incorporating that idea of wisdom and understanding and really trying to listen to and incorporate all sides of an argument can sometimes be very difficult, but I equally think it's important. So anytime I feel that trigger, that nudge to get angry and get aggressive, I take a moment and I step away and I really try to think about, maybe this person's never considered another perspective. A lot of times what you end up realizing about situations like that is many people are just carrying around a lot of hurts and pains and anxieties and traumas from things that have happened to them previously, and it is translated into very negative ways as they've continued to evolve, holding on to that trauma. And if you try to remember that when you engage with people, it can kind of bring another level of understanding and hopefully some sense of greater understanding and compassion when you engage with people. It ain't easy. I ain't saying it's easy, but I do really try to work with the Druid sense in that way. And that's kind of what Druidry has come to mean to me, this connection to my own creativity and believing in it and trusting it and acting on it and working with it. But then also this sense of connection to myself, to nature and the world outside, but then my connection to everyone else on this planet. And then utilizing all of that to connect to the Druid sense, the Druid wisdom of trying to determine how we build a better world by thinking about situations and solutions from more than just my own perspective. And in a lot of ways that has shaped how I work with everything from my school studies to my connections and relationships with friends and family and loved ones to even how I communicate on social media. It makes me feel better and more not just connected, but like I'm owning my own sense of integrity. And that's why Druidry has meant a lot to me since I started working with it, because you know, when it came into my life, I was very depressed and I had a lot of negative beliefs about myself, about, you know, men and women, and about my own self-worth as a woman. And finding this earth-based path and connecting to it, researching it, understanding it, and incorporating the things that I have learned into my own life empowered me. It made me feel a lot better about who I am. It made me take ownership of myself and really work on my own crap, essentially. It made me be more active and in working with my own mental health and taking care of myself. When I recognize harmful thought patterns coming up, or when I recognize that a painful memory or trauma from my own childhood came up, I would actively work on it and figure out the root cause of it. And all of these things have really helped me become a better version of myself and help me understand people a little bit better. I feel that Druidry has helped me a lot in a lot of different ways, and I would like to think that anyone else on this path, whether, you know, your path seems similar to my path or there are big differences, I hope that whatever you're getting out of it, it is something that is helping to make you a better person, while also figuring out ways that you can be a better person, not just for yourself, but for the entire world as well. I feel that's what anyone who has any sort of faith should be, in a sense, bringing to the table with their faith. You know, whether you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, you know, pagan, or even atheist, I would like to think that everyone has something that they believe in. If you're an atheist, it might not be a divine or a deity, but hopefully you believe in something that connects us and and something that moves you forward to being a better person and individual for yourself and your own growth, but also for the world as well. I think that is what anyone who has any sort of faith in anything, I think that's the best thing you can get out of it. So I hope, if nothing else, this has given you some insights as to what Druidry and paganism can mean to people and what it can bring and how it at least works for me, I guess. So that's something. Anyway, I'm gonna cut this video now because 45 minutes. Could I make a short video at some point? I'd love to be able to do that. All right, I'll talk to y'all later. Anya out. Bye.